In this lesson, we're going to look at an important strategy that you can use on text completion sentences, and it's especially useful in certain challenging triple blank text completions. So what happens is sometimes you just can't tell what's in the first two blanks if you look at the context immediately surrounding them. And at times like this, what you want to do is you want to go to the third blank, start there, and work backwards to the first two blanks after you solve the third blank. So once that third blank is solved, the first and second should hopefully fall into place much more easily than they would at first. So for these, the usual strategies for text completion are in play. The difference is that you're doing the blanks out of what would normally be the logical order for doing the blanks. So just as a reminder, you want to read and mentally paraphrase the context, putting it in your own words and thinking of your own words also for the blanks, obviously. You want to find the answer that matches your own understanding of the meaning of the words and the meaning of the blank. And the difference, again, is that you're going to come up with your own word and find the matching answer in the third or final blank first. So, in other words, this should be familiar territory, just done in a different sequence. So now, let's apply what I've just told you to a practice question. So, let's see if you can do this. As a spoiler, you are going to find that you're stuck on the first and second blank. So, take a look at this, work backwards from the third blank. I'm going to pause the video, and when we get back, we're going to talk about this. So let's take a closer look at this. And before we do go to that third blank, let's talk about why the first two blanks, if you just look at that first sentence, are pretty unsolvable. So let's check out this. Now, the problem is here that there's, just with this context, a variety of things that adapting a movie from a book, cinematic adaptations of books, could be. Just from this, maybe they're difficult. Maybe they provide unique opportunities. Maybe they provide abundant inspiration. Now you get a slight hint by looking in blank 2 and seeing what could pair with what. But inherent difficulties and unique opportunities can both be rewarding or challenging. So we're seeing some possible pairings there. For that matter, abundant inspiration can also be rewarding or challenging. So we have this tangle of arrows, and we're like, what is going on here? All these things can match. Derivative is kind of the odd one out because it is negative, so it doesn't match with the idea of opportunities or inspiration. But also, if something is derivative, presumably it hasn't been worked hard on. People just copied something else. So although difficulties in derivative are negative, derivative doesn't quite mesh with negative either. So we can rule out derivative, but we still have quite a few possible combinations for blank 1 and blank 2. So we want to look at blank 3 to figure out exactly what's going on here. So let's look at blank 3. Blank 3, or the text leading up to blank 3 as well. We've passed this first sentence. Adopting a new story format presents blank, and cinematic adaptations of books are especially blank. Now we're seeing in a classic example, they're giving an example of what's being said in the first sentence. Robinson Crusoe, which was based on a book, was blank at best. Well, that's interesting because the phrase at best in this context is being used to give something faint praise, or no praise at all, where you're just saying it wasn't really good. At best, it was only this, so it could have been better. Well, we don't want impressive, because if something is impressive, it kind of is the best. Oh, I'm really impressed. This is so awesome. That suggests the best. So you're not making faint praise. You would maybe say it was impressive and it was the best. You're not going to say it was impressive at best. Scandalous. Scandalous is kind of negative. Scandalous means indicating a lot of moral mistakes, a lot of things, a lot of bad behavior. So scandalous, we'll put a pin in that. Ambitious. Ambitious indicates trying hard, but it doesn't necessarily indicate succeeding. So you could say something's ambitious at best. That makes sense. Could be used for faint praise. Well, scandalous. What does this prompt say about the movie after this middle sentence? It says the film was useful as a cautionary tale. Was it a moral cautionary tale against something scandalous? No, it's about what filmmakers should avoid when they make adaptations. So it's it's a good way to caution people to say don't do what these filmmakers did in terms of filmmaking technique. Well, filmmaking technique is about technical skill. It's not about moral decisions. So scandalous doesn't work. Ambitious has got to be it. So let's plug that in. And from there, we should be able to figure out the first few blanks. Oh, pardon my terrible handwriting here, but ambitious. Scrawled out a little bit badly. Okay, so we see that in an example of what's being said in the first sentence. The example is Robinson Crusoe, which tried hard at its best but didn't quite do what it needed to do, and instead was an example of what filmmakers shouldn't do when they're adapting a book into a movie. So, we're saying that an example of something in sentence 1 is a movie that isn't very good, even though people tried hard. If you try hard and you don't succeed, sounds like you probably face some inherent difficulties here. So that should go up into the first blank. So we have inherent difficulties. Unique opportunities doesn't really work. The opportunity to do what? To fail? That doesn't quite fit. Abundant inspiration. The positive idea of being really inspired and having all the inspiration you need doesn't mesh well with the idea that this film wasn't as good as it should be, that it tried and failed. Okay, yeah, so now let's go to blank 2. So, adapting a story to a new format presents inherent difficulties. An example of these inherent difficulties is a film that was ultimately a failure. Well, a failure of a film is not rewarding, but it could be challenging, especially if you were ambitious but failed. So we have inherent difficulties, challenging and ambitious, and we got that by working backward. Now, the next thing I would really like to do here is let's look just at what the answers are and do a final comprehension check to make sure the sentence fully makes sense with these selected answers, because it's always important to do at the end of a complicated text completion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase all these notes and look at this answer with just the correct answers filled, or this question with just the correct answers filled in. Okay, so I've cleaned up the notes a good deal, and we can just see the answer choices filled in, and we're going to use this strategy you should use on all text completions, which is once you get to the end, do a double check to make sure everything is understandable and makes sense with the answers you've chosen plugged in. Okay, so what this is basically saying is that adapting a story from one venue to another is difficult, and adaptations of movies based on books is especially hard. And it says, we're going to give you an older example. Robinson Crusoe was at most ambitious. So the filmmakers tried really hard, but they didn't quite get there. Still, the film is useful because it's a cautionary tale. In other words, it gives people a good look at what they need to be careful with if they're making a film, and what to avoid when they're adapting a film from written fiction. Okay, so we look at that, and we can paraphrase a sentence and perfectly understand it with these answer choices plugged in. They all make sense. We must have gotten to the right answer choices employing the strategies we talked about.